Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. This video is kind of an opinion piece. It's just sort of a roundup, if you will, of the last year. And, we've now passed March 26, 2021, which marked the one-year anniversary of the implementation of the emergency decree, which has resulted in a lot of these current restrictions that we're currently dealing with. And where are we at 1 year on? Well, we're a little wiser, at least I am, especially I'm a lot less, maybe I'm a little more cynical, a little more jaded. I certainly thought that this was I was hoping this would end, by last summer, and clearly that hasn't happened. Where are we with respect to immigration? Well, in a lot of ways, we're not that different than we were back in the fourth quarter of 2020. I will say we're in a decidedly different position than we were at the beginning of last summer, where it was effectively impossible to get into Thailand but for a work permit holder, a foreign national to get into Thailand, except for a work permit holder. But across the board, the situation has been, it's been fluid, but it has largely, to some degree, it's just generally more restricted. Let's just leave it at that. And where do we see things going in the future? Well, hopefully they're going to ease up. As we've talked about in other videos, it looks like we're not really going to see fundamental, just total rescission of all of this until at the earliest 2022, which I find it very interesting. As in an American context, I watch a lot of American news. The notion of 2 weeks to flatten the curve has become something of a joke. For good or ill. I'm not really getting into the validity of all this. It's just sort of, the expectations we had a year ago, now I don't know if you call them naive, but they certainly were not in line with how the reality played out and how things are processing moving forward, at least in an immigration context with respect to both the U.S. and Thailand. In many ways, it's gotten more restrictive over time, especially with respect to the United States. Back under the old administration, and again, this isn't political commentary, this is just sort of my observation from afar, there weren't a lot of restrictions on, especially on Americans returning to the U.S., whereas now there are some, and it looks like we're dealing with, all this discussion of so-called vaccine passports, a year on. This was, as we've discussed on this channel before, this was all kind of viewed as hysteria on the part of people reacting to the government response, and now it seems to kind of be viewed as pretty standard. It's almost as if it's a foregone conclusion, depending on what parts of the press you read. So the reason for this video is a lot's changed. The emergency decree came into effect. It put a lot of restrictions on. It gave a lot of amnesties out for immigration here in Thailand. That's all largely gone away. So here we sit, and we're going into a period where presumably we're going to start seeing aspects of these quarantines being dropped and things kind of returning to some semblance of normality. But all of that, again, remains to be seen. So we'll keep you updated over the course of the forthcoming year, but it has been a long, strange trip. I will say I never thought back in March of last year that I'd be standing here right now talking about this a year on, that we're still dealing with fundamentally the same regime with respect to immigration, at least in Thailand and the United States, or at least in Thailand. The United States has shifted a little bit, but with respect to Thailand, I never would have thought we'd be dealing with this a year on, and especially after it's just wrought, real despair, real havoc to the Thai tourism industry. I figured long ago, some of this would have gone away, but again, here we are, and it looks like, yes, in some form this is going to evolve for the better, but at least for the foreseeable future, we're still going to be dealing with substantial restrictions on coming into Thailand and going into the United States.